We remember Marcel Jamala-Fontaine. We salute Gregory Rabès. And we salute and honor the late Felix Henderson, Gordon Henderson, Leroy Waddick-Strauss for their pioneering work in preserving the Creole language and for engineering such a brilliant idea.
That journey takes us way back because the language was created by the enslaved Africans using the French language as a base and including African and Kalinago words and changing the structure of the language and creating what we have now come to know as our own Creole language. I remember in the 1950s, leading into the 1960s, a lady by the name of Mabel Sissi Corderon formed a group by the name of the Kyrie Artistic Troupe, and singing and performing Creole songs, including songs that she herself composed. And Creole at that time was looked down upon by the society. I remember in 1965, the National Day competitions were introduced by the then Chief Minister, Edward Oliver LeBlanc, and the Patois Song Competition, as it was called at the time, was part of the competitions. And they provided a wonderful opportunity for the promotion of Creole songs and Creole music of Dominica. And that competition has evolved into the Independence Creole Song Competition, which we still have annually in Dominica. I remember too in the late 1960s and early 1970s, Jean Lawrence Mathurin composing and performing Creole songs together with her group, the Sifflet Mortain Chorale, and recording two wonderful albums, the music from which is still very popular today. In those days, there was also La Jeune Étoile Chorale from Grand Bay, which also recorded traditional Creole songs, especially from the Grand Bay experience, and their music helped to promote and preserve the Creole language. In 1971, Radio Dominica had just come on stream, and the manager at the time, Jeff Charles, used the opportunity to really promote the Creole music of groups like the Kyrie Artistic Troupe, the Sifflet Mortain Chorale, and the La Jeune Étoile Chorale. And while these songs and Creole language promotion were not in the schools at the time, but they were playing a great role in public awareness and appreciation of the language, and also a great role in public education. Because as we all know, education is not just in the classroom, but education takes place at the home and in the communities and on the media. And all these forms of education help to build our system of public education. So Radio Dominica, which then evolved into DBS Radio, began introducing Creole language programs like Nous-Mêmes and Esperience Creole, and they also introduced Creole news as well on DBS. In the 1970s, our popular Kadas music was created, and that type of music also began promoting the Creole language through music of bands like Exile One, Grand Max, Midnight Groovers, and Bells Combo, and individual artists like Ophelia and Janet Azuz. In 1981, when Alwyn Bully was Chief Cultural Officer, the Comité Poétique Creole, KEC, was created, and Heritage Day and Creole Day were introduced into the independence celebrations, and the Creole Dictionary was researched, compiled, and published through the hard work of persons like Marcel Fontaine, Felix Henderson, Sonia Agpa, Gregory Rabès, Sonia Lloyd, Arlington James, and Sonia Rivera. Since then, in addition to the dictionary, KEC has researched, compiled, and published, together with the Cultural Division, a number of books promoting the Creole language, such as Pawol Kadi, a book containing over 500 Dominican proverbs. Tim Tim Glodubut, with about 366 Creole riddles, and Me Bredex, which is a compilation of hundreds of various Creole expressions of Dominica. About 20 years ago, the Cultural Division introduced a Creole poetry competition into the Independence literary competitions. And since then, the division has published 3 volumes of illustrated short stories and poems, which include the prize-winning Creole language poems through the years. And the Cultural Division has recorded many of Dominica's folk songs, most of which are sung in Creole, and the division has also recorded an album of Bele songs, all sung in Creole. 10 years ago, Keck, again with the assistance of the Cultural Division and with the collaboration of the Ministry of Education, introduced the annual Creole Spelling Bee competition for primary schools, a program which has encouraged school children in Dominica, especially the younger ones, to study the spellings, meanings, and pronunciations of many Dominican Creole words. We're hoping to have the 11th edition of this primary school's Creole Spelling Bee on May 12th this year as part of Domfesta. The National Youth Council, through the efforts of their president at the time, Josiah Benoit, organized after-school classes for school children to learn and speak the Creole language. And 2 years ago, Keck, together with the collaboration of Charlene White Christian, Magali Celestine, and the Ministry of Education, initiated the introduction of a pilot project to teach Creole in primary schools. This program is still ongoing since then. The UWI Open Campus has also embarked on a program of teaching Creole to adults in 6-week programs taught by Sonia Agpa and Delia Coffey Weeks. The Comité Poétique Creole, Keck, is just about to launch a program of activities to observe its 40th anniversary of promoting and preserving the Creole language in Dominica. And Keck is also about to publish and launch a new Creole language dictionary through the efforts of persons like Sonia Agpa, Gregory Rabes, Arlington James, Charlene White Christian, Magali Celestine, Sonia Lloyd, and Delia Coffey Weeks. Recently, a lady by the name of Sylvia Henderson Mitchell also published a book called Creole Dominique, Dominican Creole for Beginners, which essentially explains Dominica Creole grammar in very simple terms. The World Creole Music Festival, as we all know, has been a very effective international platform for the promotion of Creole language and Creole music. So we have made great strides in Creole language development in Dominica, but we now have to look at how we can build on these foundations set by all those involved in one way or another. I think it's important, especially tonight, that we recognize the efforts which have already been made in the promotion and preservation of the Creole language, and also to come up with new ideas and suggestions as to how we all can take the promotion of the language to another level in Dominica. I want to take the opportunity to suggest some strategies for the way forward. I think we should expand the teaching of Creole in schools to all levels at our educational institutions in Dominica, in order that as many age groups as possible can be encouraged to speak and write the language. We should also train a cadre of teachers in the teaching of the Creole language. We must continue to research and produce Creole publications, which will help to expand our resource base, all of which could be used as learning tools in our schools and for the general public. On our radio stations, and while they're doing a fine job, there could be more time dedicated to the promotion of the language, which would help with public education and strengthening of the language in the country. And we could certainly attempt to speak and make more use of the Creole language in our churches and government and private institutions. Language, as we all know, is an essential part of our culture and heritage. As we are aware in Dominica, we speak English, Creole, Khoikhoi, and Kalinago, and they are all important languages. The Creole language, which is what we are discussing this evening, helps us to communicate with our Creole-speaking neighbors, especially Guadeloupe and Martinique. And the language is helping us to communicate easier with the Haitians who are now here in Dominica. The Creole language has been a part of the roots of Dominican culture and heritage, and we should make every effort to keep it alive. And we are now hoping that together with the Ministry of Education, we can begin to build on further inclusion of the language in our schools, in our national education curriculum. And I must say I was heartened by the words and statements by the Honorable Minister for Education, in order that we can give greater exposure and promotion to this Creole language. And in that way, we will be helping to further ensure that the language will be around for a very long time to come. In closing, I continue to urge both government and private sector to continue to invest in the preservation and development of our Creole language, and also to recognize the importance of Creole language to our life and cultural expressions in Dominica, and in so doing, help us to build a greater sense of national identity and pride. I also encourage all Dominicans, especially the young people, to speak the Creole whenever the opportunity arises. And in that way, we will all be helping to preserve our traditions and help keep alive a very vital part of our culture. Merci tout le monde et puis bon Dieu béni.